The clink of crystal glasses, the murmur of powerful voices, and the low hum of a grand piano filled the air of the Sterling Room, the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan. Deals worth millions were sealed at these tables, and reputations could rise or fall with a single whispered comment. Tonight, however, the carefully curated world of power and privilege was about to fracture in a way no one could have predicted. It began with a sound no one expected, metal scraping against marble. Heads turned. A boy, frail and trembling, struggled to move between the tables. 10-year-old Ethan Callahan wore heavy braces on his legs, his pale hands gripping the sides of his chair before he rose with visible effort. His face was pale with fear, but his eyes searched for something or someone. Then he extended his hand. The restaurant froze. His target wasn't another child or a family friend, but Naomi Brooks, the only black waitress working the floor that night. She stood stunned, a tray of untouched champagne flutes balanced in her hand, as the billionaire's son held his arm toward her. The piano, as if sensing the tension, had just shifted into a soft, delicate waltz. The silence broke like glass. "Sir, control your son," barked Mr. Ellison, the manager, rushing forward. His voice sliced through the air. "This is inappropriate. Our staff are not here to entertain guests' children." "This is not enough," snapped Damian Callahan, owner of Callahan Enterprises and one of the wealthiest men in America. His face was taut with restrained fury. For 2 years, since the car accident that had left Ethan partially paralyzed, he had kept his son hidden from the world. This dinner was supposed to be a cautious re-entry, a public test of appearances. And now, before half of Manhattan's elite, his son was reaching for a waitress, as though she were a princess in a fairy tale. "Ethan, sit down." Damon's command was low but firm. Naomi didn't move. She had been invisible for years, trained to smile, to fade into the background, to absorb insults as part of the job. But tonight, something in the boy's trembling hand pulled her from the shadows. Slowly, she set the tray aside. "Mr. Ellison," Naomi said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest, "my shift is over." She untied her apron, folded it carefully, and placed it on the table nearest her. Then she did the unthinkable. She smiled at Ethan, bowed slightly, and took his outstretched hand. "I can't dance in an apron." The collective gasp of the room was almost physical. "What do you think you're doing?" Damian's voice thundered as he rose from his seat, his powerful frame casting a shadow over both of them. Naomi looked directly at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm accepting an invitation, sir." And with that, she allowed Ethan to take the lead. The boy dragged one leg forward, the metal brace screeching, his small body shuddering with the effort. Naomi didn't correct him, didn't guide him. She matched his broken rhythm with patience and grace. Step by halting step, they moved together in the tiny clearing between the tables. "She'll be fired tomorrow," whispered a woman in pearls, her voice dripping with disdain. Damian's jaw tightened. Memories crashed against his carefully constructed walls. His late wife, Isabel, laughing as she spun Ethan in their living room, whispering, "It's not about perfection, Damian. It's about connection." For the first time since the accident, his son's face wasn't twisted with frustration or defeat. Ethan's expression was one of focus, of pride. He was leading, not being led. "Mr. Callahan," the manager hissed, "I promise you this will never happen again." "She be disciplined." Damian didn't respond. He couldn't. Every eye in the room was on him, waiting to see if the Titan of Wall Street would crush this fragile rebellion with a single word. But all he could hear was Ethan's faint laugh, a sound he hadn't heard in years. When the boy finally stopped, Naomi bowed as if finishing a formal performance. "Thank you for asking me, Ethan," she said with dignity. "It was an honor." As she turned to leave, Damian's voice cracked through the silence. "Wait." The crowd held its breath. Even Naomi froze. her hand tightening slightly around her folded apron. "What's your name?" His voice was quieter now, unrecognizable even to himself. "Naomi Brooks, sir." Damien repeated it slowly, as though committing it to memory. Then he pulled a card from his jacket and extended it toward her. "My office. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock." The restaurant exploded with whispers as Naomi took the card. Her face was composed, but her hand trembled. "Dad," Ethan whispered once she walked away, his voice carrying just far enough to pierce Damien's chest. "Why did you do that?" Damien had no answer. For 2 years, he had silenced every part of Ethan's life that reminded him of failure, of loss, of things he couldn't control. But in that fragile moment, his son had done what no doctor, no therapist, no empire could accomplish. He had led. The meal ended in uneasy silence. But Naomi's calm determination as she left, head high, lingered in Damien's mind long after the other guests resumed their laughter. Something had cracked inside him, something he could not yet name. The next morning, the glass lobby of Callahan Tower gleamed in the sunlight. Naomi, dressed in her best navy skirt and white blouse, the only outfit that could pass for professional in this world, felt painfully out of place. Her purse was worn, her shoes slightly scuffed. People in the lobby wore watches worth more than her rent. "Naomi Brooks to see Mr. Callahan," she told the receptionist, who eyed her with suspicion before making a call. 18th floor. "Miss Keating will escort you." In the mirrored elevator, Naomi steadied herself. She wasn't afraid. She had faced worse than a rich man's anger. What she felt was resolve, sharpened by years of being underestimated. Miss Keating, Damien's assistant, was a tall woman with perfect posture and a gaze that sliced like glass. "He's in a call," she said briskly. "This way." As they walked the pristine corridors, Naomi felt eyes following her. A black woman in these offices was rare enough to provoke whispers. "Let me guess," Keating said dryly, once they were alone in the waiting lounge. "He had you fired?" Naomi arched a brow. "That happens often?" "Often enough. Clients complain, staff disappear. People like you, people like me?" Naomi repeated softly. Keating adjusted her glasses. "People who don't know their place." Naomi smiled faintly, not in amusement, but in defiance. "And where exactly would that be?" Before Keating could answer, her phone buzzed. "He'll see you now." Damien Callahan's office occupied half the floor, the skyline of Manhattan sprawling behind him like a private kingdom. He stood at the window, his back rigid, as Naomi entered. "Mr. Callahan," she greeted formally. He turned slowly. His face was composed, but his eyes betrayed something restless. "Miss Brooks, thank you for coming." He gestured to a chair. "Please." The silence stretched calculated, Naomi realized. A silence designed to make her speak first, to make her uncomfortable. She had seen the tactic before. She would not yield. Finally, he broke it. "Do you have an educational background?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? College, degrees." "Yes." She kept her voice steady. "Bachelor's degree in child development. I was working on a master's in special education, but had to stop." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He opened a folder on his desk, its contents clearly prepared in advance. "I did some research. You founded something called Step Forward 6 years ago, a dance program for children with disabilities." Naomi sat up straighter. "Co-founded with my sister. And now it's closing due to lack of funding." She didn't flinch. "Yes, I didn't bring you here to offer money." "Good," Naomi said evenly, "because I didn't come to ask for it." For the first time, Damien's mask cracked. A brief, humorless laugh escaped him. "Fair enough, then let me be direct. I want you to work for me." Naomi blinked. "As a waitress in your home?" "No." His tone sharpened. as a therapeutic companion for Ethan. The room smelled of damp concrete and iron, like a forgotten basement sealed off for years. Mary's wrists burned under the tight rope, her breathing shallow as she tried to make sense of her captor's face. She knew him. She was sure of it. His eyes were too familiar, the scar along his jawline too distinct to be coincidence. Why? You? Her voice cracked, the weight of humiliation pulling each word down. You worked for my father. You served drinks at his galas. You opened doors. You was invisible, he interrupted sharply, his tone slicing through her memory like glass. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. You looked right through me every single night. All of you did. Do you know what it feels like to serve champagne in a house bigger than any hospital I've ever seen, while knowing your mother is dying in a crowded public ward? Mary's lips trembled, but she said nothing. The ropes bit deeper as she shifted in her chair. Shame pulled in her chest, but survival instinct forced her silence. He crouched, bringing his face level with hers. You never noticed me, but I noticed everything. Every cruel word your father whispered to the staff. Every time your mother avoided eye contact when she caught him with another woman. And you, Mary, he smiled faintly, but it wasn't kindness. You wore diamonds like armor. You were untouchable. Mary shut her eyes. Images of chandeliers, laughter, and empty stares flooded back, collapsing her certainty that her family's empire had been flawless. The humiliation was sharper now, being tied, cornered, and reminded that she had once been blind to suffering. What do you want? She whispered, barely audible. His silence was worse than any threat. He rose, paced slowly around her, and finally spoke. I want what was stolen. Dignity, truth, and maybe, his voice dropped, justice. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She thought she understood what ransom meant, but this was different. This wasn't about money alone. This was personal, tangled in wounds she had never imagined existed. Minutes bled into hours. The only sound was water dripping in the far corner of the basement. Mary's mind raced. She remembered fragments of his name, Daniel. Yes, Daniel Ortega. He had been a waiter, no, a driver once. His presence was faint in her memories, but now his rage gave him gravity she couldn't escape. At one point, Daniel placed an old tape recorder on the table. Its buttons were worn, the plastic yellowed with age. He pressed play. Static crackled, and a voice filled the room, her father's voice. We'll bury it. No one needs to know. The boy's mother is nothing. Disposable. Mary's eyes widened. The words cut her like knives. What is that? Daniel's eyes glinted. Evidence. Proof that your family's empire is built on lies, on discarded lives. Mine included. Mary's mouth went dry. She shook her head slowly. That can't be real. But her conviction faltered. She knew her father. His arrogance. His cruelty disguised as charm. It sounded exactly like something he would say. Daniel leaned in, his whisper brushing her ear like cold wind. Your humiliation tonight is just the beginning. You'll see what it feels like when the truth comes out, not just for you, but for the empire you all worshipped. Tears streaked Mary's face. For the first time in her life, she felt powerless, not because she was tied, but because she realized her family's power had always been stolen from others. And now the reckoning had found her. The darkness of the room pressed heavier. Each moment was a reminder. This was no ordinary kidnapping. This was moral revenge, crafted by someone who had been invisible too long. Mary's thoughts spiraled, panic rising. But beneath the fear, another sensation stirred a bitter seed of doubt about her own past. What else had been buried in her family's shadow? What part of her life had been bought with silence? Daniel's footsteps echoed as he left her alone in the damp chamber. The sound of the lock clicking shut sealed the truth. She wasn't only a hostage. She was a witness to the unraveling of everything she thought was untouchable. The morning light barely filtered through the narrow basement window, painting thin stripes across the cold concrete floor. Mary sat rigid, her wrists still aching from the ropes. Her mind, however, was working overtime. She replayed the audio from the tape recorder, trying to make sense of her father's words and the fury in Daniel's eyes. The door creaked open, and Daniel returned carrying a folder. He placed it gently on the table and pulled up a chair across from her. Mary flinched instinctively, but forced herself to meet his gaze. "I want you to understand," Daniel said quietly, his voice calm now, almost teacher-like. "This isn't just about me. It's about the countless people your father ignored, the lives used as props for his empire. You live in a tower of gold, Mary, but it's built on suffering." Mary swallowed hard. Why me? Why now? Daniel leaned back, studying her like one might study a fragile artifact. "Because you can change things, or at least bear witness. You have influence, even if you've never used it. You've been handed power without ever knowing what it costs others." She shook her head, the shame coiling tight in her chest. I don't know if I can. I'm not like you." "That's the point," Daniel said sharply. "You've never had to be. But now, you're forced to confront it. You're not just my captive. You're the heir to the empire that ignored me. That silenced people like me. You have a choice. Perpetuate it or change it." He opened the folder, revealing photographs, documents, and news clippings. Mary leaned in, her breath catching as she saw faces she vaguely recognized: workers, employees, women from her father's charity, all with stories attached that had been married or ignored. "Look at them," Daniel said, his finger tracing the edges of the photos. "People with talent, with hope, with dreams, discarded like trash. Your father funded only what he could showcase. Only what made him look generous. These people? They didn't matter." Mary's eyes stung. She had lived in that bubble, shielded by marble floors and crystal chandeliers. She had never seen, never noticed, never understood the weight of privilege wielded without conscience. "Your father doesn't see you," Daniel continued, "and until now, you've never had to see me. But look at me. I'm a man who was invisible, pushed aside, yet here I am, reminding you of a truth you've ignored. Are you listening, Mary?" "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm listening." "Good. Listen further." He pointed to a section of the folder. "These are memos, letters, and reports. All of them rejected by your father's board. Requests for funding, for care, for recognition, and all of them ignored. Why? Because they weren't profitable. Because they didn't make him look powerful. Do you see the pattern?" Mary nodded slowly. Her mind reeled at the systemic cruelty she had been blind to. I see it." Daniel leaned in closer. "And now you can choose to ignore it, like your father, or you can act. The question is, will you?" The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. Mary had always wanted to please, to be admired, to maintain the facade of the perfect daughter. But now, the reality of lives crushed under her family's empire pressed down, demanding acknowledgement, demanding action. A sudden movement at the far corner of the basement caught her attention. Daniel followed her gaze and smiled faintly. "You notice things now. Good. Awareness is the first step." Hours passed, the conversation moving from revelation to confrontation. Daniel's patience was inexhaustible, his mission clear. Mary, meanwhile, was unearthing a part of herself she had never explored. The empathy, the outrage, the moral clarity buried under years of privilege and ignorance. Eventually, Daniel stood. "I'm leaving you for now. But remember, Mary, you have choices. The ropes will come off, but the truth will remain. What you do with it will define you. Mary exhaled, her wrists tingling as the restraints loosened. She rubbed the marks, feeling both physical and emotional scars. But there was something else, too. A spark, fragile but undeniable, that whispered this was a moment she could not squander. Outside the basement, Daniel made sure she saw the street through a small grated window. "One more thing," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The world sees the facade, but you now have the insight. Use it wisely." Mary nodded silently, feeling the gravity of the encounter. She was shaken, yes, but awakened. And for the first time in her life, she realized the power of acknowledgement, the responsibility of influence, and the courage it would take to confront a legacy of cruelty. Hours later, back in her penthouse, Mary sat at her father's dining table, still in shock, but more alert than ever. Her phone buzzed with notifications, emails, calls, and text messages she had ignored for years. Her fingers hovered over the screen, a decision forming. This was not just about survival anymore. This was about rectification, about action. For the first time, Mary felt the weight of responsibility not as a burden, but as a call to arms. She would not let her father's empire continue unchecked. She would honor the invisible, the disregarded, the powerless, and she would do it with courage. And somewhere, she knew, Daniel Ortega was already watching, waiting to see if she would rise or remain a shadow in the halls of privilege. The following days were a blur of quiet strategy and clandestine research. Mary pored over every detail Daniel had given her: the rejected proposals, the overlooked charities, the stories of employees pushed out by her father's relentless ambition. Each document was a thread, and she began weaving them together into a tapestry that revealed the true cost of her family's empire. She started with the human stories. Names, faces, voices, people who had been silenced, discarded, ignored. Mary made lists, contacted old acquaintances discreetly, and pieced together the network her father had dismissed. The more she learned, the more determined she became. Meanwhile, Daniel remained elusive. He checked in only through encrypted messages, guiding her subtly but never imposing. His lessons were brutal in their clarity. Privilege without awareness is a weapon, and those who wield it often hide behind wealth and charm. Mary listened, learned, and planned. A week later, she arranged a meeting with a trusted legal consultant who had quietly advised the family's philanthropic ventures for decades. Mary spread the evidence on the polished oak table, watching as the consultant's eyes widened. This is significant," the consultant whispered. "These are cases that could completely redefine the Montgomery Foundation. You've got leverage, influence, and an opportunity to reshape priorities." Mary nodded. "I want to fund the programs that matter, not the ones that make us look good, the ones that actually help people." The consultant hesitated. "Your father will not approve. This is revolutionary, and he will resist." "Then we act with or without him," Mary replied firmly. There was no arrogance in her voice, only conviction. That evening, Daniel appeared at a safe meeting point, a modest cafe far from the glass towers that represented her family's wealth. He slid into the seat across from her, his expression unreadable. "You're moving fast," he observed. "I don't have the luxury of hesitation," Mary said. "I've seen the consequences of inaction. I've seen the human cost. I won't repeat my father's mistakes." Daniel's eyes softened ever so slightly. "You've changed since the basement. I underestimated you. Perhaps there is hope for your family yet." Mary allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Hope is earned, and it starts with action. Over the next several weeks, Mary navigated the treacherous waters of corporate politics with quiet precision. She reallocated funds, established oversight for neglected programs, and personally engaged with community leaders who had been ignored for years. Slowly, but unmistakably, The empire's resources were redirected toward actual impact rather than image. Richard Montgomery, her father, was oblivious at first. His arrogance blinded him to the subtle shifts Mary was implementing. But soon, he noticed reports arriving from programs that had previously received zero attention reports that showed measurable results. Stories of lives changed, and gratitude from people he had long dismissed. One afternoon, he confronted her in his expansive office, overlooking the skyline like a king surveying his kingdom. "Mary," he began, voice edged with frustration, "what are you doing? These programs weren't meant for this. You're undermining decisions I've made for decades." Mary met his gaze steadily. "No, Father. I'm correcting decades of oversight. The empire you built is hollow unless it serves people, not just prestige." For a long moment, silence filled the office. The weight of her words hung between them. Richard, who had spent a lifetime measuring power in dollars and influence, realized the uncomfortable truth. His daughter was wielding authority. He had never taught her to value moral authority, empathy, vision. "Perhaps I underestimated you," he admitted finally, voice low. "And perhaps I misjudged the worth of the people I dismissed." Mary inclined her head, acknowledging his rare humility. "It's not too late to make it right, but we must act swiftly, decisively, and with integrity." In the months that followed, the Montgomery Foundation underwent a transformation. Programs that had languished without funding flourished under Mary's oversight. Scholarships were granted to overlooked students. Community initiatives were revitalized. Policies were rewritten to ensure transparency and fairness. And quietly, behind the scenes, Daniel monitored progress, ensuring that Mary's newfound awareness translated into tangible change. The public only noticed the results: a more compassionate, socially responsible Montgomery Foundation, unearthing decades of neglect and turning them into impact. Mary's name became associated with courage, initiative, and moral clarity. She maintained discretion about her collaboration with Daniel, allowing the story to focus on outcomes rather than personal drama. One evening, as Mary walked through the newly renovated community center, she paused to watch a group of young adults engaged in mentorship programs she had personally funded. Laughter echoed, ideas flowed, and the space thrummed with energy she had never imagined it could hold. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, a quiet pride that had nothing to do with wealth or social standing. Daniel appeared at the entrance, observing silently. "You've done more than I expected," he said softly. Mary turned, meeting his gaze without fear. "I had to. Watching people suffer silently, it's unbearable." He nodded. "You've learned what so many never do. That true power is not about control, but about enabling others to rise. That lesson is far more valuable than any fortune." For the first time since their encounter, Mary felt a sense of closure. She had faced humiliation, exposure, and moral reckoning. But she had emerged not just unbroken, but transformed. The wealth and influence she inherited were now tools for justice, not instruments of oppression. Richard Montgomery, observing from a distance, finally understood the lesson Daniel had tried to teach all along. Legacy is measured not by what you build for yourself, but by what you enable others to achieve. He approached Mary quietly, laying a hand on her shoulder. "You've taught me more about leadership than any boardroom ever could," he said, his voice sincere. Mary smiled, the tension of the past months dissolving. "It's not about me. It's about everyone who deserves a chance." And in that moment, in the quiet glow of the evening skyline, Mary realized that true transformation is not a singular act. It is a sustained commitment to seeing, acknowledging, and uplifting those who have been invisible for too long. She glanced at Daniel, then back at her father, feeling a profound understanding settle within her. Power wielded with conscience and humility can change lives, reshape legacies, and spark revolutions far beyond the reach of money alone. In the empire of glass and gold, Mary had found her voice, and with it she had begun a revolution of dignity, respect, and true leadership that would echo for generations.